At just 19, Amara was excited when she was invited to her sister Ngozi's grand wedding in Lagos. She had always been the quiet and humble one in the family, blessed with long, beautiful hair that many admired. But instead of celebrating her, her own parents grew jealous. On the morning of the wedding, they forced her down and cruelly cut off her hair, saying she was too beautiful and would embarrass her sister. Tears filled Amara's eyes as she watched her beauty stripped away, her heart breaking at the cruelty of the people who were supposed to love her most. Still, she gathered her courage and went to the wedding. Guests whispered when they saw her short, uneven hair, but Amara carried herself with quiet grace. During the ceremony, the groom's wealthy uncle kept glancing at her. While others saw shame, he saw natural beauty, dignity, and strength in her confidence. Later, when everyone gathered, he stood and made an announcement that left the hall in complete silence. He declared that Amara would be sponsored abroad to study and would also receive a grant to start her own business. The family that tried to humiliate her sat frozen in shock, unable to speak. Guests clapped and cheered for Amara, praising her courage and true beauty. That day, the girl they wanted to hide became the star everyone admired. Amara, once mocked, was now the one with a shining future, proving that no one can dim the light of a pure heart. Zawadi was only 18 when her elder sister's wedding in Nairobi became the most painful day of her life. Everyone in the family was busy preparing for the glamorous event, but instead of giving Zawadi a dress or helping her get ready, her parents turned against her. They dragged her into a room, insulted her, and chopped off her long, shiny hair. With cruel words, they called her ugly and unwanted, saying she should not outshine her sister. Zawadi cried silently, her heart shattered, wondering why her own parents treated her like a burden. When the ceremony began, Zawadi walked into the wedding hall with her head lowered. Guests noticed her uneven hair and whispered, while her parents looked satisfied with what they had done. But Zawadi carried herself with quiet dignity, even though inside she felt broken. She sat at the back, almost invisible, while the bride and groom enjoyed the spotlight. Then, in the middle of the celebration, an elderly lawyer walked in holding an envelope. He asked for silence and explained that he had been sent to read out the last wishes of Zawadi's late grandmother. Everyone stopped eating. Everyone turned to listen. To everyone's shock, the lawyer announced that Zawadi, not her elder sister, not her parents, was the rightful heir to her grandmother's estate. The estate included land, houses, and a business that brought in steady income. Gasps filled the room. The groom's family immediately turned their attention to Zawadi. They stood and congratulated her warmly, praising her grandmother's wisdom for choosing her. The same relatives who mocked her short hair now looked at her with respect and admiration. Her parents' faces turned pale, realizing the daughter they tried to humiliate had just become the most powerful person in the family. Tears rolled down Zawadi's cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy. She finally felt seen, loved, and valued. Guests clapped for her, some even stood to embrace her. The bride and her parents were left embarrassed, while the groom's family made it clear they would honor Zawadi as the true heir. What was supposed to be her day of shame turned into her day of victory. That night, as Zawadi looked around the hall, she realized life had given her justice in the most unexpected way. The girl her parents called ugly and unwanted was now the one with wealth, power, and blessings. The entire city would talk about this wedding for years, not because of the bride, but because of the moment Zawadi rose from humiliation to honor. It was a day that proved no cruelty can stop destiny, and no one can bury the light of a chosen heart. Efua had always been known in her neighborhood, in Accra, for her natural beauty and her long, flowing hair. But on the day of her elder sister's wedding, her parents did something that crushed her spirit. Out of jealousy and fear that she might steal attention from the bride, they cut her hair roughly, leaving it uneven and short. They told her to hide at the wedding and not make herself too noticeable. Tears rolled down Efua's cheeks as she looked into the mirror, hardly recognizing herself. She wrapped a scarf around her head, wishing she could just disappear. When the wedding began, the atmosphere was full of music, laughter, and colorful outfits. Efua sat quietly in a corner, trying to avoid people's stares. Guests whispered, some even mocked her scarf, but she stayed calm, holding her pain deep inside. She didn't want to ruin her sister's big day, even though her heart was breaking. As the evening went on, the drums and music filled the hall. The master of ceremony called everyone to the dance floor. Efua hesitated, but the energy of the crowd pulled her in. Slowly, she stood up and joined the circle. When she began to move, something magical happened. She danced with grace, confidence, and joy, forgetting about her hair and all the cruel words. The scarf slipped off her head, revealing her short, uneven hair. For a moment, there was silence. Then, suddenly, the guests began to clap and cheer loudly. They saw not shame, but courage and beauty shining from her. Among the guests was a wealthy businessman who also ran a modeling agency. He could not take his eyes off Efua. After the dance ended, he walked straight to her in front of everyone. With a big smile, he announced that he wanted to offer Efua a modeling contract. He said she had the natural beauty and confidence that the world was waiting to see. The hall erupted in applause. Some guests shouted blessings for Efua, while others looked shocked. Her parents, who had tried to hide her, sat frozen in their seats. The same daughter they tried to embarrass was now the center of the celebration. People congratulated Efua, taking pictures with her and praising her bravery. Her sister's wedding suddenly turned into her moment of destiny. Efua's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of happiness. She realized that true beauty is not just an appearance. It is in the heart, the spirit, and the confidence to rise even when others try to break you down. That night, she walked out of the wedding hall not as the forgotten girl with short hair, but as the young woman with a shining future. The wedding guests would never forget the dance floor twist in Accra, where a girl humiliated by her own family became the star everyone celebrated. Nabari was only 19 when her sister's wedding day arrived in Kampala. The whole family was busy decorating, cooking, and preparing for the big celebration. But instead of being treated with love, Nabari was treated with cruelty. Her parents, jealous of her natural beauty, dragged her into a room and cut off her hair unevenly. They told her she must look less than her bride sister, and they laughed as she cried. Her heart ached, but she stayed silent, because no matter how much they hurt her, she still respected them as her parents. When it was time to go to the church, Nabari tried to hide at the back. Guests whispered when they saw her uneven hair, and some even mocked her, calling her plain and unworthy. Her parents felt satisfied, thinking they had destroyed her presence. Meanwhile, her sister walked proudly in her wedding gown, receiving all the attention. Nabari sat quietly, her head lowered, wishing the day would end quickly. But life has a way of surprising everyone. In the middle of the ceremony, the priest suddenly paused. He looked around the church, and then called out Nabari's name. Everyone turned to see her, and whispers filled the room. With shaking hands, Nabari walked to the altar, not knowing what was happening. The priest smiled warmly at her and announced that he had an important message to deliver. He opened a sealed envelope and explained that it came from Nabari's late uncle, who had passed away months earlier. The letter revealed that her uncle had loved Nabari dearly and had left her a full scholarship fund to study abroad, along with extra money to help her build her future. The entire church gasped in shock. Her parents froze in their seats, unable to believe what they were hearing. Suddenly, the same guests who had mocked her just moments earlier stood up and began to clap. They congratulated her, praising her uncle's wisdom and God's blessing upon her life. Her sister, once the center of attention, was now forgotten as all eyes turned to Nabari. People surrounded her, shaking her hand, hugging her, and calling her the blessed one. Nabari's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. She felt seen, valued, and lifted high by the very community that once looked down on her. Her parents bowed their heads in shame, realizing they had tried to bury a star that God himself had chosen to shine. That day in the church became unforgettable. What was meant to be a moment of humiliation turned into a moment of victory. Nabari, the girl her parents tried to break, became the one celebrated by everyone. Her story spread across Kampala as proof that destiny cannot be stopped, and blessings always find the one they are meant for. Thandi had always been the quiet soul in her family, gentle and kind, with a beauty that shone without her even trying. But on the morning of her sister's wedding in Johannesburg, her parents treated her with cruelty instead of love. Out of jealousy and fear that she might draw attention away from the bride, they chopped her beautiful hair unevenly. As she stared at herself in the mirror, her tears fell like rain. She felt broken, humiliated, and unwanted, but she stayed silent, carrying her pain inside. When the family arrived at the wedding venue, everyone was dressed in elegant outfits, glowing with pride and joy. Thandi, however, was mocked for her uneven hair. Some guests whispered, while others laughed openly, calling her ugly and spoiled. Her parents ignored her hurt and pushed her to stand far behind in the wedding photos. Thandi lowered her head, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. But fate had other plans. The wedding photographer, a man with a sharp eye for beauty, kept noticing Thandi. While everyone else saw shame, he saw something rare and striking in her face. Her short, uneven hair didn't hide her glow. It made her stand out even more. After finishing the family photos, he quietly pulled Thandi aside and asked if he could take a few portraits of her alone. Nervously, she agreed. As the camera clicked, Thandi slowly lifted her head and allowed herself to smile. With every shot, she grew more confident, her natural beauty shining brighter than ever. The photographer encouraged her, telling her she had something special that the world needed to see. For the first time that day, Thandi felt seen and valued. Weeks later, something unbelievable happened. The photographer shared her portraits online, and within days, the photos went viral worldwide. People from different countries commented on her beauty, her strength, and her natural confidence. Fashion agencies began reaching out, magazines wanted her on their covers, and modeling scouts sent invitations. Thandi, once mocked and hidden, was now being celebrated by thousands of strangers across the globe. Her parents, who had laughed at her and chopped her hair, were left speechless. The daughter they had tried to shame was suddenly becoming a star. At the same time, the people who once mocked her at the wedding now praised her, saying they had always known she was special. Tears of joy filled Thandi's eyes as she realized her pain had turned into purpose. The very thing that was meant to destroy her had opened the door to her destiny. She stood taller than ever before, no longer the forgotten sister, but a shining name across the world. That wedding day in Johannesburg would never be remembered for the bride's gown or the decorations. It would be remembered for the moment the photographer's lens found Thandi and revealed her light to the world. It was the day humiliation turned into glory, and a hidden star was born. Chanda had always been a gentle and kind-hearted girl, loved by many outside her home, but mistreated inside her own family. On the day of her elder sister's wedding in Lusaka, her parents did something cruel. Out of jealousy and fear that she might draw attention away from the bride, they cut her beautiful hair unevenly. They mocked her and told her she looked ugly, forcing her to sit quietly at the back of the reception hall, where no one would notice her. As the music played and guests enjoyed the celebration, Chanda sat with her head lowered, trying to hide her pain. People glanced at her and whispered cruel things, laughing at her short, rough haircut. Her parents smirked with satisfaction, believing they had succeeded in humiliating her. But despite her sadness, Chanda carried herself with quiet dignity, refusing to cause a scene. In the middle of the celebration, the groom's grandmother, a respected and wise woman, noticed Chanda sitting at the back. Her sharp eyes studied her carefully, and she felt a strange pull toward the young girl. Slowly, she stood up and called for silence. Everyone turned to look as she walked through the crowd and reached out her hand to Chanda. With a kind smile, she pulled her forward and asked her to stand by her side. The entire hall was confused, whispering in surprise. Then the grandmother made an announcement that no one expected. She revealed that after observing the family, she had decided only Chanda had the humility, strength, and pure heart to inherit the family's jewelry line, a business that had been passed down for generations. She declared that Chanda's character shone brighter than gold, and she trusted her alone to continue the legacy. The hall erupted in gasps. Guests clapped and congratulated Chanda, praising her as if she were royalty. Her parents stood frozen, their faces pale with shock. The same daughter they had hidden and mocked was now the one chosen to hold the most valuable inheritance in the family. Even the bride and groom looked stunned as all eyes turned away from them and toward Chanda. Tears of joy rolled down Chanda's cheeks as people hugged her, blessed her, and celebrated her new role. For the first time, she felt seen and honored, not because of her looks but because of her true worth. The cruel act of cutting her hair could not hide the beauty of her heart. That wedding reception in Lusaka was remembered for years, not for the flowers, the food, or even the couple, but for the moment a humble girl named Chanda rose from the back of the hall to the center of greatness. She proved that no amount of cruelty can bury destiny, and that real beauty will always shine through. Aissatou was just 19 when her elder sister's glamorous wedding filled Dakar with music, laughter, and celebration. The hall was decorated with flowers and golden lights, and everyone wore their finest clothes. But while the world saw joy, Aissatou's heart was breaking. That morning, her own parents had dragged her into a room and cut off her beautiful hair, leaving it uneven and rough. They told her she was too pretty and might embarrass her sister. They wanted her invisible, unwanted, and forgotten. As the guests arrived, Aissatou tried to hide at the back, lowering her head so no one would notice her. People whispered about her strange haircut, and some even laughed. Her parents pretended not to know her pain, smiling proudly at the bride instead. Aissatou swallowed her tears, telling herself she would endure the day quietly, even if it meant being treated as nothing. The wedding carried on with music, dancing, and speeches. But then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the exchange of gifts. Guests began handing over their presents, wrapped in shining paper and ribbon. Aissatou sat silently, not expecting anything. But then, to her surprise, her name was called. A small, elegant box was placed in her hand. Confused, she carefully opened it, and inside was a sealed letter from her late grandfather. The priest asked for silence as the letter was read aloud. In it, her grandfather expressed his deep love for Aissatou. He explained that he had always seen her kindness, her humility, and her strength. And then came the shocking revelation. He had left his mansion and property in her. The entire hall gasped in disbelief. Guests turned to look at Aissatou, their their eyes wide with respect and admiration. Her parents froze, unable to move. Their plan to make her invisible had failed in the most dramatic way. Instead of being forgotten, Aissatou was suddenly the most important person in the room. The mansion her grandfather left her was not only valuable, but also a symbol of honor, power, and legacy. People stood and clapped, congratulating her, blessing her, and praising her grandfather's wisdom. Even the bride, once the center of attention, was pushed into the background as everyone surrounded Aissatou. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly loved. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy. That night, Aissatou's story spread quickly through Dakar. The girl who had been humiliated with a cruel haircut became the rightful owner of a grand mansion. Her parents, who tried to bury her light, were left in shame as their daughter's destiny shone brighter than ever. The glamorous wedding was remembered for one thing only, not the music, not the food, not even the bride's gown, but the moment a gift box revealed the true heir. It was the day Aissatou rose from humiliation to honor, and her name became a story of victory across the city. Mekts had always been admired in her neighborhood in Addis Ababa for her natural charm and her long, beautiful hair. But on the morning of her sister's wedding, jealousy filled her parents' hearts. Afraid that she might steal attention from the bride, they cruelly cut her hair short and uneven. They laughed at her tears and told her to cover her head so no one would see her. With a heavy heart, Mekts tied a scarf around her head, trying to hide both her hair and her pain. When they arrived at the grand wedding hall, everything sparkled with joy. Bright lights, colorful dresses, and music that made the air vibrate. But Mekts felt invisible, tucked away in her corner with her scarf tightly wrapped. Guests whispered about her strange appearance, and some even mocked her. Her parents ignored her completely, satisfied that she looked less than her sister. As the evening went on, the music grew louder and the dance floor filled with excitement. The master of ceremony invited everyone to join the traditional dance. Hesitant at first, Mekts stood at the edge of the floor. Slowly, the rhythm of the drums carried her forward. She began to move gracefully, her body flowing with elegance that no scarf could hide. People clapped to the beat, surprised at her confidence. Then, in the middle of her dance, the scarf slipped from her head and fell to the ground. For a moment, the hall went silent. Everyone could see her uneven, chopped hair. But instead of laughing, the guests gasped at her striking beauty. Her short hair framed her face in a way that made her look bold, strong, and unforgettable. Applause filled the room as people cheered for her courage and grace. Among the crowd was a well-known fashion scout visiting from abroad. His eyes lit up as he watched Mekts. He saw not just a girl with short hair, but a star waiting to shine. When the music stopped, he stepped forward in front of everyone and announced that he wanted Mekts to walk in an upcoming fashion show. He praised her natural look and unique confidence, saying the world needed to see her. The hall erupted in celebration. Guests surrounded Mekts, congratulating her and blessing her. Her parents stood frozen, their mouths open in shock. The daughter they had tried to hide was now being lifted into the spotlight by strangers who saw her true value. The bride, once the center of attention, was forgotten as all eyes turned to Mekts. Tears filled her eyes as she realized destiny had found her in the most unexpected way. What was meant to break her became the very thing that opened the door to her future. That wedding in Addis Ababa would be remembered not for the decorations or the couple, but for the runway entrance of Mekts, the girl whose scarf fell and revealed not shame, but greatness. Amina had always been the quiet, hard-working girl in her family, but her parents never appreciated her. On the morning of her elder sister's wedding in Kigali, instead of showing her love, they humiliated her. Out of jealousy, they cut her hair short and uneven, mocking her and saying she looked ugly. They told her to stay out of the way, so she would not steal attention from the bride. With tears in her eyes, Amina dressed simply and went to the wedding, carrying the pain in her heart. At the ceremony, the guests noticed her rough haircut and began to whisper. Some laughed openly, asking why she looked so plain compared to her sister. Her parents looked satisfied, as if their plan to embarrass her had worked. Amina sat quietly at the back, listening to the music and speeches, but feeling invisible. Even when she tried to smile, the humiliation cut deep inside her. What no one knew was that Amina had been building a secret life for herself. For years, she had worked hard, starting a small online business and growing it little by little. She had saved every coin, invested wisely, and turned her earnings into something big. But she kept it hidden because her parents never believed in her and always treated her like a failure. When the wedding ceremony ended, the guests began stepping outside, chatting and laughing. That was when a sound caught everyone's attention, the smooth purr of a luxury car pulling up to the entrance. Heads turned in shock as the shining car stopped and the driver's door opened. To everyone's disbelief, It was Amina who stepped out confidently, her short hair glowing under the sun, her face shining with pride. The crowd froze in silence. Her parents' smiles faded, and even the bride and groom stared with wide eyes. People began whispering in amazement, asking how she could afford such a car. With calm grace, Amina explained that she had built her own business from nothing, and this car was just one of the results of her hard work. She spoke with quiet strength, and every word struck her parents with shame. Suddenly, the same guests who mocked her earlier began to clap and cheer. Some rushed to congratulate her, others praised her determination and independence. Amina, once treated as the forgotten daughter, was now the one admired by all. Her parents lowered their heads, realizing the daughter they tried to humiliate was far more successful than they had ever imagined. Tears of joy filled Amina's eyes as she looked at the crowd celebrating her. The pain of rejection began to fade, replaced with pride and hope. That wedding day in Kigali was no longer remembered for the bride's dress or the decorations. It became famous for the moment Amina pulled up in her luxury car, shocking everyone. It was the day she proved that no cruelty could stop her, and that real success shines brightest when no one believes in you. Halima walked into her sister's coastal wedding in Mombasa with her head lowered. That morning, her parents had chopped off her hair, laughing cruelly and calling her ugly. They wanted her to look small and forgotten beside her sister in the shining gown. As she sat quietly, guests whispered and gossiped about her appearance, some even pointing and mocking her. Halima's heart ached, but she kept her dignity, holding back tears. The ceremony was in full swing when suddenly, the doors opened and a lawyer walked in, holding a brown envelope. The room fell silent as he asked to speak. With everyone watching, he announced that he carried the will of Halima's late aunt. The crowd leaned forward in curiosity, and her parents stiffened in their seats. The lawyer read aloud that the aunt had chosen Halima, not her sister, not her parents, as the rightful heir to her coastal property, including land, a house, and a thriving business. Gasps filled the hall. The bride froze in shock, the groom's family exchanged worried glances, and Halima's parents sat pale with shame. In that moment, the gossip turned into applause. Guests stood and congratulated Halima, praising her aunt's wisdom. The same people who had laughed at her short hair now looked at her with respect. Halima's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. The wedding that was meant to humiliate her transformed into her victory day. In Mombasa, people would remember it not for the bride's dress or the ocean view, but for the moment Halima rose from shame to honor, proving that destiny cannot be stopped.